Hello there, dear viewer. Today I'm going to be talking about some great releases on Blu-ray and 4K from Indicator, which has long been one of my favourite boutique Blu-ray labels, and hopefully in this video you're going to see why that is the case. Before I get into all of the great films from Indicator that I've been watching, they just made some new announcements. They are finally releasing Carnal Knowledge, the Mike Nichols film, on 4K and Blu-ray. You can actually tell it's been long in the works because the spine number is in the 100s, whereas I think in the newer releases they're up to the 400s. So this one has been in the works for some time. Alongside that, they are releasing a film called A Day at the Beach on Blu-ray, which I know very, very little about. So I'll be going into that one blind. But as with every Indicator release, I'm sure I'll find some great surprises in that one. And then rounding out these new announcements, there are two US 4K releases of two great Basil Dearden films, which I love, and I have the UK Blu-rays of those from Studio Canal. But now that I know that they're getting 4K releases with Dolby Vision HDR, I might have to double dip on those. The two films are The Gentle Gunman and The Ship That Died of Shame. Basil Dearden is a great figure in British cinema history, a filmmaker who often doesn't get talked about, so those are newly announced. But let's get looking at some of the recent films that I've been watching from Indicator. I've been going back a few months now and catching up with what they've released, but there's some great stuff here. The first one I want to talk about is a 4K release. It's The Escapees. This is one of the Genre-Lan 4K UHDs that Indicator have been doing a great series of, and I think they have something like 20 titles in total from Genre-Lan to release. So they are steadily releasing these, and these have been a major discovery for me, because going back many years ago, I dismissed the works of Genre-Lan, Jess Franco and a few other filmmakers as being sort of trashy cult films that really didn't have much artistic merit. And I was so wrong. And the recent 4K releases of these Genre-Lan films have really cemented just how wrong I was. At least on a personal level. Obviously your mileage may vary, but I think there is some great artistry in the works of Genre-Lan. These aren't just silly genre films. The films are packed with captivating visuals and such rich atmospheres that they really are incomparable in many senses. And I'm very excited for the forthcoming release of The Iron Rose, which I think was one of the very first Roland films that I saw where I was starting to change my mind about the filmmaker and these types of films. This one here, The Escapees, from the early 1980s, follows these two girls who escape from an insane asylum, and they go on the run and they end up meeting all of these strange characters, these people that are like dressed as pirates and sailors. They are these traveling performers, these dancers, and criminals, and there's a lot of strange goings on in this film. I'm not sure it entirely makes sense to me, but boy, like I mentioned, the atmosphere in these films are so rich, and the film on the 4K disc from Indicator is beautiful. It just looks so rich. They haven't really put a foot wrong, as far as I'm concerned, with any of the 4K releases that I have seen. So personally, when I get a 4K UHD from Indicator, I am fairly confident that it has been put together with the utmost care, just like with all of their Blu-rays that I have in my collection. Of course, there are a great many special features on this release, as you can see listed on the back. Some of my favourites here, I really enjoyed the new commentary with Tim Lucas and the interview with Genre-Lan, which is an older interview with the filmmaker, which has been represented here, along with some other interviews with the actors involved, and much more. This is a fantastic release. Comes in one of these slimline hard cases, which they've been doing for all of the Genre-Lan 4Ks. And as well as the film in the digipack, you do get a booklet here, or it's more of a book really, not a booklet, which has some new writings, some old writings, and some interviews which have been transcribed here. So that's The Escapees, Genre-Lan on 4K. As always, a great release from Indicator, but we have another one coming up right now. This one is Requiem for a Vampire. This one comes about a decade before The Escapees. Much like The Escapees, this one begins with two young girls on the run, running through the countryside until they end up at this chateau where this old vampire lives with his cult that surrounds him. And then lots of strange erotic things ensue. This one is a bit of a strange one, even within the filmography of Genreland, because the film has very little dialogue, so it is sort of in the vein of The Iron Rose or something like that. But then you've got the beautiful countryside imagery, you have this central gothic figure of the vampire, you have the chateau location itself, and all of this is just kind of blended to make this very unique style Genreland film. Of course, there is a surreal nature to this film, one that I, again, absolutely loved the atmosphere. First and foremost, that is what draws me into a Genreland film, and this film has it in spades. The presentation of the film in 4K is also beautiful, really showcases the location, the countryside, the beautiful colours in this rich film. So I was very pleased with how the film looked on the 4K disc, and if you're a Genreland film, well, pick this up without hesitation because, as I said, Indicator rarely put a foot wrong with their releases. Of course, you have a ton of special features on here as well. There's a big list here on the back. One of my favourites again was the brand new commentary, this time by Troy Howarth and Nathaniel Thompson, which was recorded newly for this release. And there is a whole load of archival features on here, but there's also a brand new making of documentary which has been made in collaboration with Genreland's personal assistant going into the making of this film. So that was fantastic as well. So it gets my highest recommendation, but of course you have to be a fan of Genreland and this kind of filmmaking. These aren't the kind of films that I would necessarily recommend to anyone, but hopefully just from listening to what I've said about this and the previous title, you can kind of guess if these would be the kind of things that you would want to try for yourself. But give it a go if it sounds like your kind of thing. Now onto a Blu-ray release, one that I had such a great time with. The film is Queen Bee, starring the one and only Joan Crawford. Here she plays such an acidic, horrible character that everyone around her fears and is just under her control. She is the head of this household in the American South, and we look at this story through the eyes of her cousin, who has come to visit her house, and she gets quite a surprise when she gets there because all of the other family members have this strange tension with the Queen Bee, Joan Crawford's character. It is melodramatic, it is explosive, and is honestly worth seeing for this central performance where Joan Crawford is just so nasty and vile. This release has a great audio commentary from David Jenkins, and there are some really interesting features on here, including one that looks at Joan Crawford's career and another one that looks at the costume designer that worked on this film. So this was a really enjoyable one for me, and of course you get a booklet inside the limited edition as well. So Queen Bee, if you love Joan Crawford, then this is one that you have to get. If only we had more Joan Crawford to talk about. Oh wait, we actually do. We have this one, Harriet Craig, and kind of in a similar vein, this is about a housewife who is very overbearing and she wants control over the home and her husband and just familial life. She wants to be Queen Bee. So again, a very complex character, but one that Joan Crawford always seemed quite adept at playing. The film was directed by Vincent Sherman, who some people might know as the director of Nora Prentice, and he also made some film noir and a few other familiar films that people will know. I think he made The Garment Jungle, actually, which was in one of the Indicator noir box sets, if I'm not mistaken. Again, in the special features, you get an audio commentary, a brand new one. This one I've not actually listened to yet, so I need to go back and listen to that. But some of the other special features, one that dives into Crawford's career again, and then we have two radio adaptations of the original play that is the source of this film. So another fantastic one from Indicator, and again, if you're a Joan Crawford fan, this is one to seek out. Next we have the film Now and Forever. This one has a great cast for the time. It has Gary Cooper, Carole Lombard and Shirley Temple. Gary Cooper plays this con man who wants to go straight and wants to raise his daughter well. But of course, in many of these stories, you just can't escape the life of crime, and it somehow pulls you back in. It's directed by Henry Hathaway, who made a great many film noir and westerns. He made the original True Grit with John Wayne. He made Niagara with Marilyn Monroe. And A Kiss of Death is a great film noir that he did. But he also made films like this one. And I had a great time with this, especially for Carole Lombard, who I treasure every performance that I see from her, because this was made in 1934, and within a decade she was no longer with us after a tragic accident. So she was so great. She really was, and she could have had a much longer career if she had survived. I sound like a broken record now, but you do get an audio commentary on here. Indicator are great for audio commentaries. Some other labels, and I'm not going to name any names, but they have really gotten a bit lazy with presenting new audio commentaries. But people like me, I really value them. So this one from Pamela Hutchinson, I really enjoyed. And there is a feature on here about Shirley Temple. So that's Now and Forever. But I do have another Henry Hathaway film here. It is this one, Peter Ibbotson. As you can see from this cover, this is another Gary Cooper film. This one, quite a bit different to that last film, where it opens and we see this young boy and this young girl who are, best of friends, and you can kind of tell there's something romantic here. These could go on to be a romantic couple when they're older, but they get torn apart because he ends up moving to England from France to live with his uncle, and they live their separate lives until when they are adults they end up crossing paths, but they don't initially know that one another is the other. But by this point they of course have lived their separate lives, but there is drama that ensues from this friction, this passion that might still exist between the two of them. It's a fascinating film to me because you kind of expect from that description that this is just going to be a certain type of film throughout the runtime. However, it makes some very interesting, strange choices, which I don't want to spoil. But by the time the film ends, you sort of feel like you're watching a different kind of film. It suddenly gets quite serious in a different way. Very introspective, reflective, something that you might not expect from when this film was made back in the 1930s. So an excellent film which I think is ripe for some rediscovery. Fantastic new audio commentary on here as well with Adrian Martin. And there is a radio adaptation starring Orson Welles of the original novel that the film is based upon. So Peter Ibbotson is one that gets my full recommendation. Oh, and I forgot to mention it has Ida Lupino in here in an early role. So fascinating to see her there as well. Then we come to The Lives of a Bengal Lancer. This one also directed by Henry Hathaway, starring Gary Cooper. And it seems like Indicator must have made some kind of deal to pick up a load of these Henry Hathaway films, which I'm not complaining about. Although The Lives of a Bengal Lancer, probably one of my least favourite out of this bunch. You would think that a film about the Bengal Lancers set in India with Gary Cooper in a leading role would be all about action and adventure and would feel fun. And this film actually is lacking quite a lot of fun. I really wish there was more of a sense of urgency and action in this film, but it was just kind of a bit too plodding for my own tastes. The film does also have a very positive spin on colonialism and the colonialism in India. So, I mean, depending on who you are and looking at this with a modern lens, it does feel very dated in that regard. And then an interesting fact about this film, which I found out after watching this, apparently this was a favourite film of Adolf Hitler. So, I mean, that's not necessarily a judgment on the film itself, but just an interesting fact to know. So it's a film that on paper I thought I really would like, but unfortunately the action and battle sequences that are here, I just was never that engaged in. But as always is the case, even with a film that doesn't quite strike with me, I always find some context and some appreciation in the features. You get a new audio commentary, as always. There is also a radio adaptation of the film as well. And there is another piece about an appreciation of the film. I feel like I'm losing my voice a bit, but at least I've got my indicator flavoured water here. Anyway, we soldier on. We have Shepherd of the Hills, yet another Henry Hathaway directed film, this time with John Wayne in a beautiful Technicolor presentation. This film is quite a beautiful western about this young man played by John Wayne who is full of spite and revenge when this stranger appears in their little family life and begins to show kindness and begins to change the attitudes of the people around him. So of course you can see all kinds of allegorical things that you can tie to the meaning of this film, but I found this a very enjoyable watch. I think very well directed by Henry Hathaway, who has grown in appreciation as a director after watching all of these films on these indicator discs. And as I mentioned before, the beautiful Technicolor presentation. This was a real surprise for me, a bit of a gem, and honestly I'm looking forward to revisiting this sometime in the future. You do get a brand new audio commentary on here, which is great as always. And interestingly, the feature that I really enjoyed was a discussion with French filmmaker Bertrand Tavernier, who recently passed in the last few years. But this is him talking about his appreciation of the film and the filmmakers. So a great release from Indicator. This one was a real gem. Really enjoyed it. Next up we have the film Edge of Eternity. This one was one that I really loved. Starring Cornel Wilde, a film about this series of murders that occur around the Grand Canyon, and people are getting pushed into the canyon, and there are these workmen in the story who are traversing the canyon on this cable car, and you know the first time you see that cable car that is going to play into the suspense of the film at some point. Directed by Don Siegel, who features in Indicator's own collection quite a few times, films like Charlie Varick and Madigan. So this is, a great director. I love the films of Don Siegel. Of course, he made all of those fantastic movies with Clint Eastwood as well. So Edge of Eternity, this was a real beauty to watch. It was a real scorching film. You feel the heat and the oppressive nature of the canyon and the surroundings. I just absolutely loved this. This was a real treat. In the features, you have yet again a brand new 2025 commentary. You have a couple of discussions, one about the film and then one about Don Siegel and this film in his career as a kind of retrospective. And then an interesting feature about the actress in this film, Victoria Shaw, who I wasn't too familiar with, but she had a really interesting way into the business, and she was a great performance in this film as well. So that's Edge of Eternity, a Don Siegel film, one that I'm very happy I discovered through Indicator. And then we come to Sahara, starring Humphrey Bogart, directed by Zoltan Korda. This is a film set in the middle of the desert about these Allied soldiers who are protecting this well from the Nazi forces. This was made in 1943, so the war was still going on at this point. And this is a great film, a great wartime film. Lots of suspense, thrills. Again, oppressive nature of the desert and the heat really adds to the suspense. You kind of just feel like the tension is going to blow at any minute. So I love this film. This was a real great film. I'd never seen it before, so to see it here for the first time was fantastic. Again, audio commentary, brand new for 2025. I love the Indicator are doing this. Please keep up the commentaries. I love them. And then some great special features that are not necessarily about the film itself, but one that is about the tank that features in the film, looking at the history of that particular tank, and then some of the bits that are looking at World War II itself. Fantastic release, Sahara. Please check this out if you like Humphrey Bogart, if you like a good wartime movie. This is great to watch on a Saturday afternoon. I loved it. And then we come to something that really wowed me when Indicator announced this. It is the Pryor and Wilder set of 3 films starring Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. In this box set, you get the 3 films, Stir Crazy, See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and Another You. Now, Stir Crazy is definitely my favourite of the bunch. Directed by the one and only Sidney Poitier, this is a fantastic film. I love this film. And very funny. You have these 2 central performers here who are masters of comedy. and just the timing, it's just perfection. And you can tell that we come to these films for these two performers, Pryor and Wilder, because these three films are not linked in any way. They're not linked in story. They're made by different directors, but it is the central two who we love to see. And even in Another You, which is certainly the weakest of the bunch, there's still a lot to enjoy if you like these two guys, and I certainly do. As this is an Indicator box set, you know they don't skimp on the features and booklet that's included, and there are so many features on here. I'm not going to list them all, but you have new audio commentaries and other stuff, other great things going into the makings of these films. This is a fantastic box set, it really is. And you can take off the band here as well if you just want the full artwork, which I think is a great display piece. So that is the Pryor and Wilder set, something that I'm so glad to have in the collection. And then the last thing that I got from Indicator recently, which I haven't actually even started watching, so obviously I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I got the Columbia Noir Volume 6 set, and I have the first 5, and I loved every bit of those first 5 sets. I probably said before in another video that it was last year or the year before that I went on a noir binge, and I must have watched 30 noir films in 1 month. And after that, I experienced such a fatigue for film noir. I didn't want to see a single noir film for a very long time. And it's only in recent months that I've been watching some of the classics again, and I'm now getting that taste for it after a palate cleanser. So I'm going to be delving into Columbia Noir Volume 6, because this has, how many films? It has 8 noir films in here, so yeah, I love these, and I've not opened this yet, but these are a great display piece as well. These are always such beautiful sets from Indicator, so yes, can't wait to get into this one. I know it doesn't need to be said, but Indicator have clearly set such a high standard for what a Blu-ray release can be, and they really do just nail it with the features and the visual audio presentation. It is just never subpar. It always looks and sounds excellent, and I love the design of these sets. I love the artwork, the reversible sleeves, the booklets, the film choices themselves, because many of these films I discover for the first time through Indicator, and if they didn't put it out on Blu-ray, I don't know when I would actually find those films. So it's always a treat, and they really are one of the best out there still making Blu-rays. With that said, if you want to see more from me, just click the video that is presented on screen right now. You can get some film recommendations and reviews from me. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon.